From The Australian, here's what's on the front. I'm Claire Harvey. It's Thursday, April 25, 2025. The lawyer representing Bruce Lehrmann in a Toowoomba rape trial claims important evidence like witness statements and CCTV footage is missing. The matter has been adjourned until late May while the prosecution and defence get organised. The former Liberal staffer hasn't entered a plea, but has indicated he'll fight the charges. Australians are gathering to commemorate Anzac Day around the nation today. You can read about the last flight out of Vietnam following the fall of Saigon in 1975 and the loyal Vietnamese embassy staff left behind right now at theaustralian.com.au. The Northern Territory will require judges to refuse bail to alleged offenders if community safety is at risk. That's in new laws the government hopes to pass when it urgently recalls Parliament on Wednesday, following the stabbing death of a 71-year-old supermarket worker. An 18-year-old man who was on bail at the time is the alleged offender. Today, what's gone so wrong in the Territory? In the early evenings, the residents of Nightcliffe in Darwin get out into the warm twilight air, cycling and jogging along the beach where the land meets the Timor Sea. Nightcliffe's median property price is just under $1 million, one of the Territory's most exclusive places to live. And for a long time, it has felt a world away from the really gritty crime that's one of the Territory's hottest political issues. Until Wednesday afternoon. While the after-work crowd was getting out into the evening, Nightcliffe's local friendly grocer, Linford Feek, was living out his last moments.
Well, a Darwin shop owner has been fatally stabbed after confronting a man trying to steal from his store. Let's go back to Matt Cunningham. He's live at the scene. Matt, has the offender been caught?
He was apprehended just after midnight, Pete. This is a shocking incident that will rock...
Territory Police said an 18-year-old suspect handed himself in early on Thursday morning.
The matter is currently under investigation by our major crime team with support from a myriad of other specialist areas.
As the sun rose over Darwin on Thursday, disturbing details about that alleged assailant emerged.
His birthday was just earlier this week. He turned 18 years old, very young boy, you could say.
Leah Mendez is a reporter with The Australian.
Now, there's a bunch of charges there. 2 counts of aggravated assault, threatening injury, deprivation of liberty, 2 counts of sexual intercourse without consent, 2 counts of sexual intercourse with a child under the age of 16 years of age, resisting police, 2 counts of assaulting police, and possession of methamphetamine. So, these are incredibly serious charges, and there are a lot of questions right across the Territory by people who are wondering, why was this boy on bail?
And so what do we know about that? Why was he on bail?
The interesting thing is that he was first taken into custody towards the end of December in 2023. There was an out-of-court bail hearing heard by an on-call judge, done over the telephone. He was still in the watch house when it happened, and it appears that he's just been given bail with hardly any conditions. A lot of the time, for far less serious offending, alleged offenders are often given an ankle bracelet. You see so many children walking around the Territory with ankle bracelets on. It's something that people are just accustomed to seeing.
So that was December 2023 when this young man was granted bail, and it's now a long time on. Do we know anything about what was going on in his life between then and now?
Yes, so he was essentially ordered to remain at a very small community in the Territory, and he was prohibited to enter Darwin unless he had to attend to urgent medical or dental treatment. He was prohibited from approaching or communicating either directly or indirectly with the alleged victim, and he was also banned from drinking alcohol and taking drugs.
Linford Feek is the 71-year-old man who's died. What do we know about him?
He was born in Canada. He purchased this small little grocery store that, by all accounts, is a very successful and family-run business that he operated with his wife, Margaret. He's an Australian citizen and very loved in this very tight-knit community. But this is the thing, I was talking to his son Ben, who also works at the store. You know, they had seen this increase in concerning behaviour where they almost were of the understanding that something like this was bound to happen.
In the Territory, there's no bigger political issue than crime, and Liam has spent much of the past few years covering shocking violent offending on the streets of communities like Alice Springs.
I think this has really pushed the Territory into a level where they've quite possibly never been before. There is a lot of anger. There is, to be completely honest, a lot of anger which is racially motivated. Some people don't want to talk about it, but that is the truth of what's happening on the ground there, as sad as it is. It was only earlier this month that we saw another elderly man who was essentially hacked in his own home by two young boys, 13 and 14 years old, who broke into this, also a 71-year-old man's home who was left in intensive care under heavy sedation after the attack, and he essentially had cuts to his bone from a machete. On my last trip to Alice Springs earlier this month, I met a gentleman named Bart, and he was a lovely local who lived near the hospital in Alice Springs, and there was this little riot that had occurred on his streets one evening. I arrived just about 2 to 3 minutes after police had arrived, and Bart was standing out on the street armed with a fire poker and a large can of wasp spray. And he looks at me and just says, "This is how we have to live." People are arming themselves because they're so fearful that people are going to either attack them or come into their own homes and attack them or steal their cars. This is the reality of the many people who are living in the Territory.
Sky News' Matt Cunningham spoke to the owner of the local barbershop, Kathy Zafiro, after Mr Feek's death.
I'm just in shock. I'm such in shock for the family-run business. I just don't know how they're going to move forward. $11 million to have someone murdered right in front of it. It's a joke.
That $11 million she's talking about is the giant Nightcliffe police station right across the road from where Linford Feek died. But it's never been used as a working cop shop. It's the base for the Territory's tactical cops, and it closes each day at 4 p.m. There are no cells or watch house. It's just like any other office. The Territory's Chief Minister is the Country Liberal Party's Leah Finocchiaro, who was elected in 2024 after a tough-on-crime campaign. She sheeted blame for the situation home to the Labor government, which had governed the Territory for 8 years. One of the crimes that got Finocchiaro elected was a shocking 2023 murder. A young man named Declan Lavity, who was working in a bottle shop in the suburb of Jingley, just 6 minutes' drive from Nightcliffe.
Keith Keranua was found guilty of fatally stabbing Mr Lavity during a brief but deadly knife fight inside the Airport Tavern BWS on March 19, 2023.
There were some quite dramatic scenes here after the verdict. Ash, in fact, the court was locked down for about 5 minutes. There were angry scenes as those supporters yelled out their anger and displeasure at the verdict.
Declan was 20. His killer was just 18. Keith Keranauia's family and friends said he was acting in self-defence when he plunged a knife 5 times into Declan Lavity. But the court heard he had a history of violence, including punching a 13-year-old boy just hours before he killed Declan. In June 2024, the judge gave Keranauia the mandatory sentence, life in prison with a non-parole period of 20 years.
During sentencing, the judge described Mr Lavity's murder as a violent and unprovoked attack on an innocent member of the public.
It gave some relief to Declan's family.
he not only suffered, but he died an agonising death. And I'm so glad the jury could see that that's what happened.
I think a lot of people saw the case of Declan Lavity as the sort of tipping point. That was a moment of change, and we saw Declan's law come in. Declan's mother, Samara, who I've spoken to today, she did a huge amount of lobbying with the government and has really carried on Declan's legacy to have some real meaningful change. But today she's in shock that this has happened, and she feels like after everything she's done to change some of these behaviours in the Territory, all of that was for nothing, just because there's been another death at the hands, allegedly, of a young person with a knife.
In 2024, one of Leah Finocchiaro's first acts was an attempt to reduce knife crime with an act called Declan's Law, legislation that tightened bail laws and introduced something that had been abolished, an offence of breach of bail for young offenders aged 10 to 17. The idea was to keep more alleged offenders in custody while they were awaiting a court date. Critics of the bail law, just like critics of mandatory sentencing, have long argued tighter laws don't reduce offending. Leah Finocchiaro says she's toughening bail laws again and will urgently recall Parliament on Wednesday.
What we want for the Northern Territory is to have the toughest bail laws in this country. This has been done in New South Wales and Victoria, and we're confident it could really set a strong benchmark for community safety here in the Northern Territory. It means judges must consider the safety of the community if they're going to bail that person before they go on and consider all of those other bail factors.
Here's Corrections Minister Gerard Maley.
We know this is going to be difficult and pressure on our corrections officers, and we intend to make sure that if you commit a crime in the Northern Territory, there will be a bed for you in our corrections system.
Linford Feek's wife, Margaret, said they'd been married for 51 years and had 7 grandchildren. She described Linford as a beautiful man, a true gentleman, and my soulmate, gone forever. God bless him. R.I.P. my darling man. Coming up, will this affect the federal election? Federal politicians like to say, of course they do, that crime is an issue for state and territory governments. That's true to an extent. The states and territories handle policing and justice. But in the Territory at this federal election, there'll be no getting away from crime. The Territory has the safe Labor seat of Solomon, which covers Darwin and surrounds, and is held by Labor's Luke Gosling, and Lingiari, which covers the rest of the Territory and the adjacent islands. It's held by Labor's Marion Scrimgeour on a margin of just 1.7%. Peter Dutton is trying hard to make crime a national issue.
We will work day and night to make sure that your local community, your local suburb is safer. I've always been serious in my public life as a police officer and since I've been in Parliament in protecting people, and I'm very genuine about that.
Perhaps the Territory's most famous politician on the national stage is the CLP's Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, who's a senator. She's not up for re-election this year, but she chimed in on social media after this week's stabbing, saying we must do everything we can to stamp out this abhorrent behaviour. A lot of the crime that you've covered in the Northern Territory has been late-night street violence in places like Alice Springs, gangs of kids who are not in their homes for a lot of complex reasons. There's family dysfunction, there's alcohol and drug abuse going on in those homes, and they don't feel that it's safe to go there. Every so often a federal politician flies in to look at the situation and sound concerned. How do you think Territorians regard the causes of this crime? You spoke a little earlier about vigilante violence. What do Territorians say to you about what's actually going wrong?
We're talking about incredibly complex issues here. Until you've been to some of these remote communities, you're never going to get a true understanding of what is happening on the ground there. There's a lot of people that are living in what could be described as third world conditions. There's a level of disadvantage here where children are just not going to school. You know, the amount of times where I've been at a town camp and a school bus coming through and there's 0 children on that bus. And when children are staying up until daybreak, you can understand why it's impossible to get them into school.
They threw out a Labor territory government. Both the Northern Territory's federal electorates are held by Labor. Do you think this will have an impact on the federal election?
I do. And quite interestingly, the 2 Country Liberal Party candidates that I've spoken to wipe their hands clean of crime issues. They're saying that is more of a territory government issue. When people are being killed either at their own workplace or there's home invasions happening constantly, I think there comes a point where when is this going to really become a massive federal issue? I mean, there are some people that are genuinely worried that people aren't actually going to want to live there anymore for the what they love. It's the camping, it's the outdoors, it's the beautiful bushwalks and waterfalls that you can experience. It's that lifestyle. There is a territory lifestyle that you can't experience anywhere else in this country. And that is why people live there. And there is a real fear within the community. I know many people that are genuinely planning on packing up their lives and moving somewhere else because it's just gotten to the point where they do not want to be living here anymore.
Leah Mendes is a journalist with The Australian. You can read this story as well as all the nation's best news, sport, politics and business, plus, of course, all our coverage of Anzac Day at theaustralian.com.au.